All right, let's get started on our reading. This is recording, so it'll be on YouTube later in case you need a second look at it. It's called Writing on a Wasp Nest. Remember, this week we're working on making connections in our text by making comparisons. So showing how things are the same and how they're different to help us better understand what we're reading about. So as we are reading today, you're going to see me highlight some comparisons to show some things that are similar or different. Some words we may need to know as we're reading. One word is mixture. A mixture is a couple of different ingredients mixed together to create something new. Our next word is recipe. A recipe is a set of instructions on how to create something. And ingredients. Ingredients go into a recipe. They're the individual things you need to create something, to create a mixture in a recipe. So as we read the story Writing on a Wasp Nest by Casey Hartog, we are going to be thinking about making those comparisons about how something is like or unlike something else. You're outside on a warm spring day. You hear a buzzing sound over your head. And on a nearby tree branch, you see a nest shaped like an upside-down umbrella. Wasps! Are you scared? Or do you try to get a better look? Now think about this. A nest like that one led to the invention of something you would have a hard time living without. Paper. Before paper was invented, the ancient Chinese wrote on pieces of silk, cloth. But silk was expensive. So this shows a connection. Shows before paper was invented, they wrote on silk cloth. Cloth and paper are similar because they were both used to write on. But shows a difference. Silk was expensive. We know paper is not as expensive. The empress or queen of China wanted something to write on that would be cheaper and easier to make than silk. So she asked a palace worker named Tai Lun to find a new material to write on. This happened about 1,900 years ago. According to the story, Tai Lun remembered seeing an empty wasp nest as a boy. The nest was made of a strong, lightweight material. Tai Lun knew that if he could create a material like the wasp nest, he would solve the empress's problem. So the queen wanted to be able to write more, but silk took a long time to make and it was really expensive. Silk is like that really soft, smooth fabric. Sometimes you'll see it like on a scarf. There's a lot, like silk is usually made for smaller things like a scarf because it's really expensive and it's hard to find. And so instead of writing on silk, the queen said, well, what can we do that's a little bit cheaper and that's easier to find? And he said, well, I remember seeing a wasp nest as a boy, and that wasp nest had something on it that I might be able to write on. And it inspired his idea. The job wasn't easy. It took Tai Lun 3 years to come up with the perfect mixture: tree bark, scraps of fishing nets, and water. He boiled and beat the mixture into mush. Today, we call this mush pulp. Then he stretched a piece of cloth across a wooden frame and dipped it into the pulp. When he lifted the frame, a thin layer of pulp remained on the cloth. After drying in the sun, the layer formed kagduz, which means paper made from the bark of a mulberry tree. The Chinese were proud of Tai Lun's invention and tried to keep the recipe for kagduz a secret. But slowly, traders from China brought kagduz to Japan, Northern Africa, and Europe. As the use of kagduz spread, the ingredients changed. In Europe, the people used cloth rags instead of tree bark. So in China, they used tree bark. It's different in Europe because they used cloth rags. The rags worked well, but they were not enough to make all of the paper that people wanted. Today, there's another comparison. Paper is still made the same basic way that Ceylon made it thousands of years ago. It shows how it's the same. It's made the same way. Wood is cut into small pieces, then broken down into a pulp by large grinding machines. The pulp is sprayed onto a wire screen and heated until the paper is dry. We make different papers for different uses: soft tissue, stiff cardboard, and colorful construction paper, smooth paper for computers, and glossy paper for magazines. They look and feel different, but they are all made from wood. So these different papers right here, all of these different types of paper are all different in the way they look and feel, but they're made from the same materials. Would you have thought that a wasp's nest could lead to a product we use every day? Before you run from those wasps, thank them for sharing their recipe for paper and changing our lives. And then you can run. After all, you don't want to get stung. We can see this picture at the bottom. It says a worker dips a frame into the pulp to make a large sheet of paper. So you can see how they've made the paper. All right, so I see a lot of connections here. I see how in Europe they use the same recipe, but they use cloth rags. I switched those, didn't I? Cloth rags instead of tree bark. Today we use the same recipe or the same method. We have different types of paper, but they're made from the same materials. Lots of comparisons there. Now we're going to go to page 3 and look at some of our questions. Question 1. As explained in paragraph 2, how did the new writing material need to be different from the silk cloth that was being used? So I'm going to go back to paragraph 2 and I'm going to think, how did it need to be different? Before paper was invented, the ancient Chinese wrote on pieces of silk cloth, but silk was expensive. The empress or queen wanted something to write on that would be cheaper and easier to make than silk. So she asked a palace worker named Ceylon to find a new material to write on. This happened about 1900 years ago. So, how did it need to be different from the silk? Did it need to be stronger and heavier than silk? Did it need to be cheaper and easier to make than silk? It had to be more colorful than silk, or it had to be made from the bark of trees. What did she want Ceylon to do? Why didn't she want to use the silk? Go ahead and answer that question on your paper. Remember, this is your reading grade for the week. Question 2. As described in paragraph 5, how was paper making in Europe different from paper making in China? Ooh, we highlighted this one. Paragraph 5 is on page 2. I'm going to reread it. Again, the question was, how is it different in Europe than China? The Chinese were proud of Ceylon's invention and tried to keep the recipe for cogdus a secret. Slowly, traders from China brought cogdus to Japan, Northern Africa, and Europe. As the use of cogdus spread, the ingredients changed. In Europe, the people used cloth rags instead of tree bark. The rags worked well, but there were not enough to make all of the paper that people wanted. So on page 3, how was what they did in Europe different? In Europe, there were more rags available than tree bark. In Europe, paper was made from a wasp's nest instead of tree bark. In Europe, paper was made from cloth rags instead of tree bark. In Europe, the rags worked much better than tree bark. How is it different in Europe than it was in China? Go ahead. Number 3, reread the sentence from paragraph 3. The nest was made of strong, lightweight material. What is the best way to figure out the meaning of lightweight? The word light, which means it has something to do with color. The context, that means it's similar and being strong. Does lightweight mean strong? It's made of the words light and weight, so it means not heavy. Since the material is used to make a nest, it means grassy. Which one explains what lightweight means? Does it have the word light, which means it's using color? Does it mean it's similar to strong? Does lightweight mean strong? Does light and weight mean not heavy? Or does it mean grassy? Here's a hint. They use the word strong, but it does not mean strong. Just because this happens to be lightweight and strong does not mean that that lightweight means strong. This piece of paper is lightweight, but it's not very strong because I can rip it. Right? Lightweight does not always mean strong. Yes, Byron, that is correct. So it is not B. Whoops. That's not what I wanted to do.
But why is glass so fragile?
I don't know. It just is. All right. Page 4. So make sure you highlight your answer for that one and then join me on page 4. So remember, our goal today is at the very end, you should be able to press the green check mark and turn this in. As long as you were following along with me, that's where we should be. All right, good job. This question is 2 parts. First answer part A, then part B. How is paragraph 6 connected to one of the other paragraphs in this article? I'm going to look at paragraph 6 real quick to figure out what they mean by it. Today, paper is still made in the same basic way that Ceylon made it thousands of years ago. Wood is cut into small pieces and then broken down into pulp by large grinding machines. The pulp is sprayed onto a wire screen and heated until the paper is dry. So this one's telling us how we make paper today. The question's asking, how is this related to another article or another paragraph, in the article? Does it compare how paper is made today to the description of how Ceylon made it in paragraph 4? Does it compare Ceylon's paper to the types of paper described in paragraph 7? Does it show how writing materials have changed from what was described in paragraph 2? Does it show how Ceylon's paper is different from the wasp's nest described in paragraph 3? Remember, paragraph 6 talks about today's paper. I'm going to put this word today above paragraph 6 to remind me. It's talking about how paper is made today. So when it asks about paragraph 4 was telling me how it took Ceylon 3 years to come up with the idea, the materials he used, and then the process he did, which is where he stretched the cloth and then he dried it. Today it says it's still made the same basic way that Ceylon made it thousands of years ago. Does it connect those two ideas? Remember, paragraph 6 is how we make it today. Paragraph 7 is how Ceylon made it. One of my other choices was asking about paragraph 7 for the types of paper used. Paragraph 7, it talks about different types of paper, but it does not talk about Ceylon here. Does it show writing materials from paragraph 2? Paragraph 2 talks about how they used silk. Is it connected to how they used to use silk? D says how it's different from the wasp's nest in paragraph 3. Paragraph 3, he remembers the strong, lightweight material from the nest. Is that what it's talking about in paragraph 6 when it talks about today's paper, how it's made today? Circle the best answer. This one's kind of hard. Just do your very best. And then for part B, which detail best supports it? The Empress or Queen of China wanted something to write on that would be cheaper and easier to make than silk. The use of kagdas spread and the ingredients changed. Today, paper is still made in the same basic way that Ceylon made it thousands of years ago. We make different papers for different uses. Remember, it wants to compare how we make paper today. How we make paper today. So that's what we're looking for. These are kind of tricky. Just give it your best guess. Think about which ones talk about how paper is made today. That's what paragraph 6 was all about. How it's made today. So whichever answers you choose have to talk about that. Question 5. Look at these sentences from paragraph 7. They look and feel different, but they are all made from wood. What is being compared in this sentence? And explain how the sentence connects to the one that came before it. Well, the sentence that came before this one was talking about the different types of paper, like cardboard, glossy paper, colored paper, all of that. You don't have to write this box. This is just for me to kind of remind you guys. So the sentence before was talking about these different types of paper. And then here it says they look and feel different, but they're all made from the same wood. What's being compared in this sentence? This sentence is comparing different what to each other. What is it comparing? Eli, I sent back your math. You didn't finish the first 2 pages of the activity from yesterday, so you got to finish those independent pages before you turn it in, okay? Thank you. All right, guys, if you need to take a screenshot of this page, of this part, go ahead and do that. I'll also type this sentence starter for you in the chat. 3, 2, 1 in the chat. Let's look at page 5. It says, which sentence best describes the connections between paragraphs 3 and 4? I'm going to go back and reread those 2 paragraphs on page 2. Oh, one of them's on page 1. According to the story, Sai Lun remembered seeing an empty wasp nest as a boy. The nest was made of a strong, lightweight material. Sai Lun knew that if he could create a material like the wasp's nest, he would solve the empress problem. So in paragraph 3, it's telling us about how he was inspired, or he got his idea from a wasp nest. I'm going to put this right up here just so I remember what paragraph 3 was talking about. The job wasn't easy. It took Sai Lun 3 years to come up with a perfect mixture: tree bark, scraps of fishing nets, and water. He boiled and beat the mixture into mush. Today, we call the mush pulp. Then he stretched a piece of cloth across a wooden frame and dipped it into the pulp. When he lifted the frame, a thin layer of pulp remained on top of the cloth. After drying in the sun, the layer formed kaagduz, which means paper made from bark of a mulberry tree. So he got his idea from a wasp nest in paragraph 3, and in paragraph 4, it tells us how he created his paper, or the kaagduz. So I'm going to be thinking of those 2 things. I'm going to write them so I don't forget them. So paragraph 3, idea from wasp nest. Write this with me. Paragraph 4, how he made his kaagduz paper. Here, give me a second and I'll put it next to it so you can actually read it better. There we go. So that's what it was talking about in paragraphs 3 and 4. Now I have to figure out which one of these answers best matches that. Paragraph 4 shows how hard it was to come up with a writing material similar to the wasp's nest described in paragraph 3. Well, it's talking about writing material, how we made it, and the wasp nest. Paragraph 3 shows how the wasp nest reminded Sai Lun of the recipe he came up with in paragraph 4. Reminded means it comes after. Did the wasp nest come after he created his paper? Paragraph 4 shows how the tree bark Sai Lun used was similar to the wasp nest he remembered in paragraph 3. Again, remembered and reminded. That means that the wasp nest came second. Was the wasp nest second? No, it was first event. Paragraph 3 describes the thin layer of pulp that Sai Lun tried to make in paragraph 4. So does paragraph 3 talk about the pulp, and does he try to make it in paragraph 4? Or does paragraph 4 show how hard it was to come up with the writing material, and it was the wasp nest that was described in paragraph 3? Go ahead and highlight or circle the best choice. Think about which one happened first. Reminded and remembered means that the wasp nest came second. I'm also going to put what I typed here in the chat. That way you have it in both places. 3, 2, 1 in the chat. Okay. Now, for our response, it says comparisons are used throughout the article to help readers understand more about the history of paper. Reread the article, underline the comparisons you find. We highlighted those comparisons already. Create a list of comparisons you found. We're not going to create the list, we're just going to go into the writing. Choose 2 comparisons from your list. Tell how those comparisons help connect or explain ideas in the article. So, when I go back in the article, I'm going to look for 2 of the things I highlighted. One comparison we're going to work on is silk and the kagdas that he made, the paper. So, you are going to compare silk to kagdas, which is paper. Another thing you are going to compare is how paper is made, or let me see. Different types of paper made today. And then you're going to compare different types of paper made today. So these are your 2 things to compare. You're going to compare silk to the paper. You're going to compare different types of paper to each other. Oops. Sorry, I know I keep moving it around on you guys. There we go. So a way you could do this is you could say silk is similar or different to paper because and you're also going to say blank paper is similar or different to another type of paper because. So tell me how silk is the same or similar to paper, or tell me how it's different from paper. Tell me maybe how colored paper is similar or different from printer paper, or how it said glossy paper and colored paper. They gave us lots of examples in paragraph 7. Construction paper, card paper, tissue paper, glossy paper. So you can look for that in paragraph 7. For silk and regular paper, you can look for those in paragraphs 1 and 2. This is your last step for today. Page 6 is just extra space. You do not have to write on page 6 if you don't need the extra space. If you do, it's there for you to use that space. But if you don't need that extra space for your writing, you do not have to write anything on page 6. Does that make sense? So I'm going to stay on our Zoom link for about 5 more minutes so I can leave this up for you guys. When you are done, you're going to press the green check mark and turn it in.